Homeless Billionaire. Chapter 1. The Day a Torn. Hoodie changed my plans. They thought I was just a janitor at the bus station. Truth is, I was watching folks more than I was mopping. You learn a lot about people when they don't think you matter. That day I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't looking for miracles either. I just wanted quiet. But God's funny like that. He don't wait for you to be ready. The rain had just started, soft and lazy, like it didn't want to bother nobody but still showed up anyway. I was sitting on a bench outside the Greyhound terminal in Birmingham, Alabama, pretending to read a busted magazine. I had on my oldest work coat, boots scuffed up from years of bad days, and my hat pulled down low. To anybody passing by, I looked like another tired man counting minutes till a bus took him nowhere special. That's when I saw her. She came walking across the lot with two little boys holding on to her like anchor ropes. She wore a faded red hoodie with holes at the cuffs, black sweatpants 3 sizes too big, and her shoes made that wet sock sound every time she stepped. One of the boys had snot on his lip. The other had a toy dinosaur hanging out his coat pocket. She didn't look at me at first. Just kept walking like she had a purpose and regrets fighting each other in her head. But then the littlest one stopped right in front of me, squinting hard like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. That's when she noticed me. "You all right, mister?" she asked, voice soft but real. "You look cold." I shrugged. "I'm all right. Ain't the first time I met rain." She smiled just a little, the kind of smile folks give when they want to cry but ain't got the energy for it. Then she sat down on the far end of the bench, opened up a grocery bag that looked older than the dinosaur, and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in foil. "Boys, y'all get half each, don't argue." They nodded like they knew arguing would be pointless. She held the last piece for herself but paused, looked over at me. "You hungry?" I didn't answer fast. Pride and hunger was having a stare-off inside me. "It's just peanut butter," she added, "but it's fresh. Ain't nothing wrong with it." I was about to tell her no when my stomach growled like it had its own opinion. The boys laughed. She grinned wider this time. "Here," she said, and passed me the sandwich like we was old friends. I took it slow, chewed slower. It tasted like mercy. Not 'cause it was good, it was dry and the bread was bending in the middle, but because someone with nothing had just given me something. "What's your name?" I asked finally. "Tasha," she pointed at the boys. "That's Jameer and Zion, my whole world right there." "Nice to meet y'all," I said, nodding. Zion looked at me and asked, "Are you Santa?" Tasha rolled her eyes. "Boy, hush. That man ain't no Santa. He's sitting here wet just like us." "Santa can be poor too," Jameer added. I laughed not just 'cause it was funny, but 'cause it felt like the first human moment I'd had in weeks. I watched them for a while longer. Watched how she wrapped her arms around both boys when the wind picked up. How she fixed Zion's hood without even looking. How she kept checking the sky like it owed her answers. Then the bus pulled up. Not theirs, not mine either. Just some mechanical reminder that life keeps moving whether you're ready or not. She stood, gathered her things, and started to walk off. But then she turned around. "Thank you," I said, "for the sandwich." She smiled again, real small. "Ain't nothing, just a sandwich." I watched her and those boys disappear down the sidewalk, not knowing what made my chest feel heavier. Hunger, shame, or the way her kindness hit like a memory I forgot I needed. What she didn't know and what I didn't plan on telling her just yet was that I wasn't who I looked like. I wasn't broke, and I wasn't lost. I owned the damn bus station. And that sandwich was about to change everything. Chapter 2. The Rolls-Royce on Auburn. They say when something don't make sense in the hood, folks start watching like it's a movie. So when a silver Rolls-Royce pulled up slow and quiet on Auburn Avenue 2 days later, people stopped mid-step like the pavement had hit pause. It was a bright morning, no clouds, just sunlight bouncing off that car like it was dipped in heaven's wax. Kids ran up thinking maybe it was a rapper. Old folks peeked through blinds, and right in the middle of all that curiosity, Miss Patrice stepped out in a tailored black suit and sunglasses you don't buy at no gas station. She looked around, checked the address, and walked right up to Tasha Moore's front door. 3 knocks. Calm. Like she did this a lot. Inside, Tasha had just finished wrangling Zion into a clean shirt, and Jameer was in the bathroom doing that thing boys do, taking 30 minutes to not brush their teeth. Tasha opened the door with one eyebrow already raised. "Can I help you? Ms. Moore?" Patrice smiled with her eyes more than her mouth. "My name is Patrice Hampton. I'm legal counsel for Mr. Langston Reed." "Who? You met him recently. He was sitting outside the Greyhound station." Tasha leaned on the door frame like it might explain something. "The janitor?" Patrice nodded. "Not exactly. Mr. Reed owns that building, among several others. He asked me to deliver his thanks." Tasha crossed her arms. "Uh-huh. And what's he thanking me with? Flowers? Coupon for some new socks?" Patrice chuckled softly. "No, ma'am. He'd like to cover your mother's medical bills, offer temporary housing assistance, and support for your boy's education." Now Tasha had heard a lot of things in her life. Sweet lies, smooth scams, empty promises with shiny bows. But never that. Never somebody show up with a car too clean for the street and words too generous for real life. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say nothing. She just closed the door. The neighborhood exploded with questions. Who was that woman? Why was she dressed like a TV judge? Was Tasha in trouble or rich now? Somebody swore they saw Beyoncé in the back seat. Somebody else said Tyler Perry. You know how folks get. Inside, Tasha stood in the kitchen, arms on the counter, trying to catch her breath. The sandwich. That sandwich she gave a stranger with 2 tired hands. That's what this was about? She called the number on the card an hour later. It rang once. "Ms. Moore?" Patrice answered, calm as before. "I'll talk to him," Tasha said. "But not at my house." They met the next day at a little cafe over on Edgewood, the kind with chipped mugs and gospel music humming from the ceiling. Langston showed up in jeans and a windbreaker like he was still playing undercover. He didn't bring no bodyguards, no cameras, no briefcase. Just him and that easy way of talking like you already knew him. "You ain't who you said you was," Tasha started, no smile. "I didn't say who I was," Langston replied. "But you still fed me." She nodded slow. "You testing people or something, some kind of street experiment?" He shook his head. "No test. I just wanted to know if anybody out here still remembers what kindness looks like when there's no reward." Tasha studied him like a book with bent corners. "You could have just gave a donation. Why all the mystery? Money don't show you who people really are. Hunger does. Desperation does. And you, Ms. Moore, gave your last sandwich to a stranger. Tasha sighed. It wasn't even fresh. It tasted like grace, he said. Been a long time since I tasted that. They sat quiet for a minute. Jameer spilled apple juice. Zion asked if this man had any dinosaur toys. Langston laughed. That real kind of laugh that sounds like home. He told her what he planned. Help with her mom's care. A new place for her and the boys. A school where the teachers had more time than paperwork. She asked what he wanted in return. He said, just a chance to do what my mama raised me to do. She said she'd think about it. Take your time, he said. But just so you know, the house got a red front door. Tasha raised an eyebrow. You let my boys pick the door color? Langston smiled. Zion said red was for superheroes. She didn't laugh, but something soft shifted in her face. Not trust yet. But the corner of the wall moved. A little. By the time they left that cafe, nobody had promised anything. But something was different. Not just for her. For him, too. Because that day, under that old gospel ceiling and chipped mugs, both of them realized that sometimes grace comes wrapped in foil, and sometimes it comes back wearing denim and clean sneakers. And that silver rolls, it waited out front. Quiet, patient, still shining like a secret too big to explain. Chapter 3. New Keys, Old Fears. They say when life finally hands you a blessing, it comes wrapped in a new kind of fear. That was true for Tasha Moore the day she held the keys to her new place in East Lake, right outside downtown Birmingham. It wasn't no mansion. But to her and them boys, it looked like heaven got a porch. 2 bedrooms, working heat, no mold, no ceiling stains that look like sad clouds, and a little red door out front that Zion picked himself. Said it reminded him of a superhero cape. She didn't smile at first, not really. She just walked through the room slow, checking windows, corners, pipes under the sink. Like she was waiting for the punchline. Jameer ran down the hall yelling, "We got a tub, Mama, a real tub," while Zion opened every cabinet like he expected treasure. Tasha touched the wall near the fridge and whispered something under her breath. Langston didn't ask what it was. Some prayers don't need an audience. He just handed her a folder with receipts, rent covered for a year, utilities on auto pay, fridge already stocked. This ain't charity, he told her. It's a reset. She didn't respond, just nodded once and said, all right. She started working at the foundation the next week. Not at the top, not behind no fancy desk. Langston made her community outreach coordinator. She said, you know I ain't got no degree, right? He smiled. You got street sense and heart. That's more than some folks with diplomas. She started mapping the city by memory. She knew what corner had good shade and what corner had bad history. Knew which churches fed folks without asking for their shame. She didn't talk much in meetings, but when she did, folks listened like she was saying something holy. But just when things start smelling sweet, life throws in some rot. Langston's cousin DeAndre started poking around. He was the kind of man who shook your hand while thinking of how to take your shoes. Always dressed too sharp for a Monday. Always talking numbers like people were decimal points. He'd been side-eyeing Langston's decisions for years, but when Tasha showed up in that red door house, he started growling like a dog with a bone he didn't want to share. She's cute, DeAndre said once loud enough for the boardroom to hear. But since when we handing out houses like candy, I thought this was a business, not a bedtime story." Langston didn't say much, just leaned back in his chair and looked at DeAndre like he was a fly buzzing too close. "You ever gone to bed hungry, D?" he asked. "You ever seen your mama cry over a shut-off notice?" DeAndre laughed and said, "Nah, man, I invest in solutions, not sob stories." The room went quiet. Tasha sat still, hands in her lap, eyes down, but in her chest her heart started building walls again. That fear she thought she left behind came creeping in. She'd seen how fast folks can switch. One day they call you inspiration, next day you liability. That night, back in the Red Door house, she stood in the kitchen watching the boys eat noodles like it was Thanksgiving. Her phone buzzed with a text from Langston. "Don't let him shake you, you belong here." She stared at that screen a long time. Zion looked up and said, "Mama, you sad?" She shook her head. "Nah, baby, just rememberin' I ain't dreamin'." Still, she slept light that night, ear-tuned to every creak like the walls might change their mind and evict her spirit. She knew DeAndre wasn't done. And she knew when men like that feel power slippin', they don't go quiet, they go slick. But what DeAndre didn't know was this: Tasha Moore had walked through fire with 2 babies on her hips. And once a woman's seen rock bottom and made it back with dignity intact, ain't no snake in a tailored suit gonna scare her off. The blessing was real, but so was the fight. And even though her keys were new, her fears still rattled in the lock. But every time she walked through that red door, she remembered who she was before the house, before the job, before the kindness. She was a mother. And mothers don't fold, they build, even when their hands still tremble from yesterday. Chapter 4. The meeting where truth brought its own chair. Some snakes don't hiss. They wear cologne, drive German cars, and smile like politicians. DeAndre Reed was one of those snakes, always grinning at board meetings like he invented electricity, always talking about margins, growth curves, and cutting emotional excess. Folks in suits called him smart. Folks in break rooms called him slippery. And lately he'd been sniffing around Tasha's work like a dog with too much time and not enough bone. Tasha knew he was watching. She felt it. Every time she gave a presentation about a new neighborhood program, every time she shared results from the food drive or suggested changes that actually made sense, there he was, smiling tight, nodding slow, asking questions like he already had answers. And Langston, bless his peace-loving heart, kept saying they needed to work through it like family. But Tasha wasn't stupid. Family don't always mean safe. It all came to a head the day DeAndre slid a manila folder across the boardroom table during a quarterly review. The folder was thick, like it was bloated with secrets. "Just some numbers I think we need to take a hard look at," he said, "especially around community development. That budget's ballooning, Langston. We funding hope or running a company?" Langston didn't even blink. "We're doing both," DeAndre laughed, too loud for the room. "I'm just saying charity's cute, but it don't pay dividends." Tasha sat still, hands folded. Her throat burned, but she didn't speak. Not yet. She watched Langston lean back in his chair like he'd heard that mess before. "You done?" Langston asked. DeAndre shrugged. "I just think we need leadership that balances heart with logic. Somebody who sees past sob stories and knows how to protect the bottom line." Tasha looked around the table. Some folks avoided her eyes. A few shifted in their chairs. Only Patrice, Langston's lawyer, met her gaze with something solid behind it. That night, Langston called her, said he needed her at the next board meeting. She didn't ask why. She already knew. This wasn't just about her. It was about every woman who'd ever been called too emotional for standing up. About every mother who got told she was lucky to get scraps and should smile more. She said yes, then sat up half the night writing notes, not because she needed them, but because truth deserves preparation. The day of the meeting, she wore the same red hoodie from that day at the bus station. Folks looked at her sideways. One woman whispered that maybe she should have dressed more professionally. Tasha ignored it. She came to speak, not to perform. Langston opened the meeting with his usual calm, gave a rundown, read the numbers, let the room breathe. Then he turned to Tasha. "You got the floor." She stood, voice steady, face plain, and she told the room what it looked like to live on borrowed time and borrowed kindness. Told him about shelter nights, food pantry lines, and trying to explain to your kid why the lights don't come on anymore. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just painted truth in big, clear strokes. Nobody interrupted, not even DeAndre. Then Langston stood. "I wasn't going to say anything," he said. "But sometimes silence becomes a lie. So here's what y'all don't know." He hit play on the recording. DeAndre's voice, smug and easy, spilled into the boardroom like poison in a glass of sweet tea. Talking about how he planned to phase Langston out, how the foundation needed to cut the fat, how people like Tasha make the place look soft. The room went quiet. Dead quiet. Langston let it play to the end, then handed copies of documents, email chains, wire transfers, backdoor deals to Patrice, who started passing them around like Sunday collection plates. DeAndre's grin cracked first, then his words stumbled. Then he stood up too fast, knocking over his chair like it owed him money. "This is slander," he barked. Langston shook his head. "No, this is proof." Security escorted DeAndre out without ceremony. Just a nod, a step, a door closing soft behind him like judgment finally catching up. Tasha sat back down. Shoulders dropped, not in defeat but in relief. For once the system didn't fold. For once the woman with the soft voice and loud heart got the last word without having to raise it. And in that room full of degrees and polished shoes, she reminded them what leadership really looked like. It wore sneakers, carried school flyers in a purse, and had 2 boys waiting at home with drawings taped to the fridge. Nobody clapped. It wasn't that kind of moment. But when she left the room, every head turned to follow, and not one of them saw a charity case. They saw the storm that cleared the sky. Chapter 5, The Door, the Boys, the Moral. Some blessings come loud like a choir on Sunday morning. Others slip in quiet like sunrise over a porch where the screen door squeaks just right. For Tasha Moore, it came wrapped in 2 giggling boys and a keychain shaped like a dinosaur dangling from the front door of a house she never thought she'd have. A year had passed since that first sandwich, since she sat on a bench cold and worn out and gave the last bite she had to a stranger in a work coat. Now that same stranger, Langston Reed, was more than a name. He was part of the village, and the village, well, it had grown. The Red Door house stayed. Zion still called it Superman's hideout, and Jameer had taped his latest spelling bee ribbon right above the thermostat like it was the Declaration of Independence. Tasha's mama moved in after her treatments finished. She baked cornbread every Sunday and made the boys call her Queen Marta, which they did with giggles and crumbs on their shirts. At the foundation, Tasha's title had changed, Director of Community Bridges. Sounded fancy, but all it meant was she made sure people got help without feeling small. She knew the streets, the shortcuts, the quiet families too proud to ask. And when she spoke, folks listened, not 'cause her voice was loud, but 'cause it was honest. Langston came by less now, not out of distance, but respect. He showed up when it mattered. A check-in here, a board meeting there, sometimes just a coffee and silence. They'd sit on her porch and talk about everything and nothing. He'd ask about the boys. She'd ask if he was sleeping enough. Neither one said what was floating under all that casual. One afternoon, after a long meeting about expansion grants, Langston stood in front of the staff with a simple cardboard box. Inside, a framed photo, a sandwich, wrapped in foil. Flattened from time, but still there. "This," he said, holding it up, "is where all this started. A woman gave me her last bite with no idea who I was. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't expect a return. And now, hundreds of families eat because she believed someone else deserved to eat too." Nobody clapped. They just stood there, still as pews. Back at home, Zion climbed into Tasha's lap later that night, his eyes heavy. "Mama," he said, "why you always lock the red door twice?" She kissed the top of his head. "Because now we got something worth protecting." That night, as the rain tapped soft on the roof and the city sighed under streetlights, Tasha stepped out onto the porch. She looked out past the driveway, past the mailbox with her name freshly painted, and let the silence settle. She wasn't rich, not by Forbes standards, but she had peace, purpose, people who called her when their world shook, a team that followed her lead because they saw what grace in motion looked like. Inside, the red door stayed closed. Not because she feared the world, but because the world had finally shown her she could be safe without being small. And Langston? Well, he'd learned his lesson too. That real wealth don't come from the contracts or the towers. It lives in the woman who splits her last sandwich. It echoes in the laughter of boys who once cried themselves to sleep. It grows in the soil of second chances. They say every miracle starts with a choice. Hers was peanut butter on cheap white bread. His was listening to hunger instead of hiding from it. And now they had built something that couldn't be undone. Not by greed, not by pride, not by the kind of darkness that whispers doubt in the ear when the lights go off. The door was red, the home was full, and the story, that old Southern kind of story, was just getting good. Because when you give from nothing, you change everything.